When people ask me to try and distill my person and my work into like one thing, it's really difficult. I'm trying to step back from that. I'm like, I am a multi-hyphenate. I do have a portfolio career. We're all versatile, multidimensional human beings. And like, just because we live in a world that's constantly asking for compression doesn't mean we need to actually compress ourselves. Previously, I've been asked to do and engage in that compression and put some of those other parts of myself to the side. And I'm done doing that. That's leadership on my terms and something I refuse to compromise on going forward.
Welcome to Leadership on New Terms, a show about the power and purpose shift happening right now in our workforce. I'm Caroline Fairchild, and I'm so glad to be joined here today with Simi Shah. Simi is the founder and CEO of South Asian Trailblazers. It's a media company, a community, as well as an agency focused on elevating the voices of leading South Asians. Prior to that, she was chief of staff to Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of PepsiCo. That's actually where I got to meet Simi for the first time when I interviewed Indra, and she started her career in private equity. Simi, it is so good to see you here.
Thank you so much for having me. And it feels like such a full circle moment given how many years ago we met and what we're chatting about today. So I'm really excited.
Absolutely. And let's start at the beginning of your career. You graduated from Harvard, went into private equity, and then kind of quickly realized that it wasn't the right path for you. What about the role wasn't a good fit?
I was talking to someone recently, and I don't regret the experience that I had in finance for a second at all, because it's shaped so much of my business acumen and the way that I approach my work today. But I think the particular work of late stage investing really wasn't for me, at least out the gate. And part of that was I've always had this proclivity for more creative work and storytelling and ideation. A lot of late stage investing is very focused on the numbers, on financial engineering. I wanted to exercise the creative part of my brain. And as I looked 5 years up the ladder, that's just really not what I saw myself doing. I have a low tolerance for doing things I don't want to do. Not necessarily like the nitty gritty day to day work, but like being in a career or opportunity that just feels misaligned to what I felt like was my higher calling or purpose.
Was there a specific moment where you just realized I can't do this full time anymore?
I found that the few hours I did have, I would start spinning on this podcast that I'd done my senior year of college, or I'd find myself writing, an article, for myself that I had thought about writing. And I was like, it's really telling that the limited free time I do have, I'm trying to spend on this specific type of work. I think for me, I just hit a point where it just didn't make sense. I felt so misaligned. I was at a point where I wanted to take the time to actually decide what my next step should be with intention. And if I didn't actually take some space for myself, given how demanding work like this can be, I was just going to accidentally land in some next role without giving it the due time and consideration. And so I was like, I'd actually like to give myself this time and space to consider the set of options out there. Ended up leaving a week before COVID hit. So like that whole plan went awry, and this whole idea of giving myself time and space, in the long run worked out, but it backfired in the moment. But that was sort of the, I think, inflection point of why I decided to actually make the leap.
One of the reasons that I wanted to talk to you, Simi, is that reflection that you had of I don't just want to like fall into the next thing. As someone who in their own career has fallen into the wrong things a couple times, how did you have that introspection, that ability at such a young age to know that, okay, I need to take some time and space from this to figure out what's working for me? Where does that come from in you?
Yeah, I always want to be really authentic. Like, I think it's easy for me to frame it that way now. Like, the dots always connect backwards. I think I was really fortunate in that I'm very close to my family, and I come from a very entrepreneurial family. My dad immigrated here in the late 70s as an engineer. And so I was very fortunate that I had a support system. But I think my dad especially kind of saw the writing on the wall. He was like, you're my kid, and I know exactly how you feel because I felt this way at one point in time and decided to make that leap. But I think my parents were really big advocates for me in that regard. When I quit that role, I had so many people coming to me being like, you're so brave, you're so courageous. And it was so fascinating because I didn't feel that way at all. I felt like a quitter. And I look back now and I understand that of like, I think staying in a tough situation or a situation that feels misaligned is still sometimes the easier thing for us to do because it's the default state. And I'm really bad at the default state. Like I said, I don't like doing things I don't want to do. And not just in the sense of, I know that I will give 120% to something I really care about. And so it is really weird for me to be in a position where I don't want to give 120%. I know I can find something I love and can pour my heart into and therefore succeed. And I knew like that was going to earn me the financial stability, whatever other barometers of success that I had for myself personally and otherwise. And that felt more worth my time than trying to just like hack it out in something that I knew wasn't meant for me in the long run.
After private equity, you went to this media startup. And then Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of PepsiCo, was looking for a chief of staff to help with her memoir launch. Indra Nooyi, she's one of the most powerful women in business. What did you learn in that job about how executive power actually functions? Because as chief of staff, you're so close to it.
I think there were a lot of things that I learned. I think being chief of staff, and I say this to people who always come to me asking about chief of staff roles, every chief of staff role is really different. Like even if you try and shape the role in the same way, it is a role that is tied to a person, not an institution in a lot of cases. And so I think one of the great joys of working with Indra is that she'd accomplished some pretty remarkable feats, right? And it was that she had been CEO of PepsiCo for 12 years. She had incredible success in her leadership of that company, but also a lot of women were coming to her over those many years. And when I got to work with her was on her book launch, where she was really trying to elevate this story around women managing the competing demands of work and family, which for me as a young woman was so resonant across so many dimensions as someone that was passionate about business and that level of success, but also was like, I want to have a family and I don't, I want to understand how to think about these things. She's one of the most diligent people I've ever met. There's never a document she gets that she doesn't read, even though, she was technically retired from PepsiCo at that point. Watching her hustle and like just fervor for the work and advocacy for women and the conversations she wanted to have and excitement about such a wide array of projects was really inspiring and just made me be like, if I can be half of that in 20, 30, 40 years, my God.
I love that. If you want to be the best, you have to learn from the best. And I agree with what you said about how there really is no chief of staff role. They're all different. They're not alike in many ways. But when I think about the chiefs of staff or former chiefs of staff, they're in my network. A lot of them use that role as a launching off point to even bigger C-suite titles because it's so highly regarded. Was there a moment when you realized that that wasn't the path that you wanted to take?
I like love to be a scrappy operator. And that was kind of what was missing in this hyper structured role that I had in finance, but also what I fell in love with when I was at this media startup after that. And in working with Indra on her book launch was we had such an incredible team that I got to work with, but a lot of it was like ideation and creation and thinking about new ideas. And that's where I thrive. I think again, a big part of why my dad even supported sort of my leaving the structured realm of finance is because I grew up in such an entrepreneurial household, and he called it then. He was like, it's not about the role, it's not about the industry, it's you working for yourself and getting to own your time and execute on your own ideas and move really fast.
Exactly. So you went back to business school, went to Wharton with this idea of, okay, can I actually make South Asian Trailblazers into a full-time role? If that was the question that you went into business school with, what was the answer that you came out of with?
I would like that the thing that I earn my living off of and my livelihood is on the thing that I love doing. Not everyone needs to do that. Their vocation and avocations can be separate. I have never been that person. I'm just like the thing I spend most of my time doing. I would like to make money from it, and I would like to love it. And so that was why I went into business school with that thesis. And I was like, okay, we've seen some traction, but what happens if I spend real time thinking about this aside from these other roles and responsibilities that I held? And so I think the question was like, okay, there's a media avenue. We've also coming out of COVID, we started doing events. I sort of found this reverse product market fit right as I was entering business school of a lot of the leaders that I'd had on the podcast or people that I'd met in doing this work were like, hey, you've worked in media, you have this business background, you've been a chief of staff, you have this podcast, you seem to know something about media and strategy, especially as it relates to executives and leaders. can you help us? And I'm a strong believer of like, follow your superpowers. Like, people will tell you more about what you're good at than you will ever discern yourself. Like, you have to, like, what is the thing that your friends constantly call you for? And like, that's such a good identifier of maybe what you are capable of monetizing and turning into your work. Not always, but in my case, it certainly felt that way. And so I went in with this thesis around an agency. I ended up launching it on what must have been my 26th birthday. The week school started, and I was like, I'm going to build an agency, see what happens. Can this be another mechanism to actually monetize and build a truly financially successful business? Because that for me was a core KPI. I believe strongly in internal validation, but again, I think you learn a lot from the people around you. And I was like, if the people around me have this much conviction, shouldn't I? And so I think that was the question I answered. It was like equal parts the actual business itself and equal parts like personal conviction in going full time on this.
And with this series, I really want to get into the mechanics of how leaders like you structure their time and their businesses, because I think a lot of people on the outside look at you and say, okay, but how does that actually really work in practice? So talk to me about like the three umbrellas of your business. There's the media company, the agency, and then events and community. How do they work together?
So it's a flywheel. I did not invent it. I think there are a ton of media companies out there that do a version of what I do. But so we started with a podcast, which is our Halo content product. We interview South Asian leaders across industries and we build a ton of bespoke content around that, social media, newsletters, etc. Attached to the podcast, we started doing community and events. So we do live podcasts, we do industry dinners, and all sort of a barbell strategy of like really large events for convening and networking, and then smaller events that have a more directed purpose with our given partners. And then we have an advisory business, which is really focused on founders, chief executives, and broadband leaders, South Asian and not now, who are looking for support on how to build their brands in an increasingly digital and AI led world, executive positioning, internal comms, stakeholder management, really bridging not just comms and PR and all these things, but really, a whole ecosystem around that and strategic sort of partner in that. Caroline, you know this better than anyone. A lot of media businesses are not just media businesses anymore, right? Like they have 5,000 other things going on. And a lot of companies suddenly have media businesses. For me, the reason it's been content community advisory is because those speak to my personal strengths and the personal things that I would like to spend my time doing.
Gets back to what you were saying about leaning into your superpowers. Let's talk money. Pricing, you said one of your major KPIs was making sure that this is a profitable business.
I want to start with one point because I obviously have talked about the financial sustainability piece, which is for me the reason that became an important KPI is I think especially coming out of the venture hype cycle around COVID, there were a lot of vanity barometers of success in my opinion, and coming again from an immigrant family, I'm just like, I want real metrics. That's not for everyone. That's like if you choose, like me, to in some way commoditize your passion. And so I always like to lay the groundwork for that. In terms of monetization, media, it's a lot of the expected stuff. We grew up in the heyday of newsletter subscriptions in 2020. So we played around a little bit for that. Given that we are a niche cultural community platform, at least on the content side right now, for me, it's actually been more advertising partners. 25% of the world is South Asian and growing. Our community has a ton of influence, decision-making power, wallet power, et cetera, and community perspective. With our community events, a lot of them are gated and ticketed, but that's really more lead gen and marketing for us, though we do work with it again on the partner side in terms of partners who want to access these audiences and really engage with them in a high touch way. And then the agency, we, operate on a retainer model. Sometimes we do more short-term sprints with people. It's really just like scoped on the work. And a lot of this is a little bit learn as you go and building the airplane while you're flying it. I was like, I know the advisory value we can offer, and I want to structure this in a way that I'm not trying to figure out how to keep the business functioning, and I'm also still delivering value that feels appropriate to our clients. And we've really been focused on, people that really understand the value that they can derive from this and what that can look like for them.
And you said something in our earlier conversation that really stuck with me. You said, I'm the product of this business. At the end of the day, People want me, they want to talk with me. You just said that, you're monetizing your passion. That has some structural constraints to it as well.
Totally.
So how do you think about scaling, or is scaling even a goal?
I believe in building scalable businesses. That was a lot of the thesis that I went to business school with. This is obviously, though, not a software product. It does not scale in the same way. But, like I always say, I'm like, none of the ideas, nothing I'm saying here is new or hasn't been done before. I'm not inventing Uber. And if you look at the BCGs and Bains and UTAs and CAAs and Edelmans of the world, like the agency model has been built and scaled. I do think AI is about to disrupt that in a really major way. But I think for someone like me who's just starting out, there's just an arbitrage opportunity there of like, maybe we don't scale as quickly, or the types of roles we hire for just change a little bit and we don't have to deal with like, reshaping an organization that's already massive. We can build with AI in mind, which is really exciting to me. I think AI is going to be a really big unlock in terms of, being able to replicate us in rooms we're not necessarily in. But I think some of it
Let's
is
talk
just like
more
those
about
people are out there. Yeah.
Let's definitely talk more about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, AI is everywhere. You said it's going to disrupt
Totally.
the NC model. What do you mean by that?
I'm really fortunate that I get to work with a lot of people who are super tech forward, and not everyone, but a lot who are like really down to be almost design partners with us. And I'm like, okay, gone are the days when I was a chief of staff and needed to really learn the executive's voice and write in their voice. And I still do that because I think that's a core part of my value add skill set and my team's skill set and what we deliver. But AI can do a lot of that now, right? You can upload 100 of your speeches or writings and things that you've done, your LinkedIn posts that you've done over the last 5 to 6 years, and like you can train AI up to deliver similar and potentially even more accurate quality work, right? But I still think, and so I think that is where they're like some of the more traditional work that people have done in this space is ripe for disruption. And so I'm really building with that in mind of like, I talk to our execs and I'm like, how do we help you build that AI layer? How do we help you actually create something that's collaborative with us so that we're not doing duplicative work or work that you can use in AI? What are the unique places we can play in? Because oftentimes they still want a strategic partner, and like we're thinking across the whole value chain, right? Like you're thinking about producing this piece of content on LinkedIn related to the fact that you spoke at Davos on this day about this particular topic. And how do we think about how that plugs into your press strategy with this new product that your company is launching and what you're trying to position yourself for next year, or the role that you're going to, or the company that you're trying to buy, right? Like AI can, I guess, spit that out for you, but it's so different from having an actual ideation and thought partner. So like what I put the premium value on now for the people we talk to is like, you have an actual thought partner. I'm still calling the journalist somewhere, or I'm calling this person that I know and being like, hey, we want to talk to you about this idea that we have. And like, there's going to be a premium on that as compared to, can you write this LinkedIn post for me?
Absolutely. I think I actually just posted about this on LinkedIn is what AI
I'll have
can't
to
do
check it
is
out.
connecting of the dots that you just discussed, right? And also in working with executives myself, it's messy. I feel like AI, they can spit out a really clean, polished product, but the actual content or story of like how you actually got there is what someone like you that you really need, honestly, as a thought leader who can connect those dots and really craft the story.
Totally. And it can package the strategy, but there is a relational and higher level strategic element that like that I think AI is going to level the bar for a lot of people, but that means now delivering here just got a lot harder, right? Because everyone else is suddenly equalized, right? We can all post AI slop. But like you can post AI slop, but how do you stand out, from all this noise and actually become the signal? How do you get people to call you over the 20,000 other people here? That I think is where the arbitrage opportunity is in the next few years. And then we'll have to level up again, right? When everything calibrates all over again. But I'm really bullish on that, especially because like I'm 28. I still pick up the phone and call people. And I know that's like a point of contention in my generation. Like I pick up the phone, I meet people, I do events. And that's why I'm also so bullish on the IRL part of our business. But yeah, there's a dynamic there that is not going away as much as people think that AI can spit out a strategy for you. I'm like, yeah, I have AI read my contract, I still have the lawyer like go over it one more time. Gen Alpha is going to get rid of all of that. They're going to be AI first and they're going to be like, what's a lawyer? But for now, that element, that human element is still going to reside for a lot of us because we're going to want that touch point.
Well, we need to exchange numbers because I'm a big phone person as well. So let's get this relationship off of email right after this conversation. So, Simi, what do you think people who have had careers that are mostly in institutions, let's say it's, either finance or, Fortune 500 companies, what do they misunderstand the most about working for yourself?
You can be a master of your craft, but when you strike out on your own, you have to be a master of all the things around your craft. You are not just working in the business, working on the business. And that comes with a whole host of things. I just always encourage people to think about that because we are living in an era where it's increasingly makes sense to have a portfolio career, as you've talked about a ton in this newsletter, and striking out on our own and working across different institutions. But there is a lot to be said about being a freelancer or in someone working under a lot of different contracts and also setting up the infrastructure of operating and running a business. And I just encourage people to think about like what are all the skills you need to develop around your craft beyond the craft itself? Are you ready to do them? Are you excited to do them? You're never going to love 100% of it. In fact, most days like I'm drowning in the things I don't like to do, but at the end of the day I love it because I want to build something of my own.
Simi, you're someone who to me has, just a really high sense of your self-awareness. And you built South Asian Trailblazers to elevate and tell stories that you didn't see in the landscape. I'm curious how your identity as a South Asian American sets the terms of your work. This is leadership on new terms.
Yeah. Such a great question. I started South Asian Trailblazers, to your point, out of a need. I had graduated from college. I was so connected to my culture and community growing up. I grew up in a very robust South Asian community in Atlanta, Georgia. My parents kept us really close to the culture in a way that was East meets West. And then I graduated and I was like, okay, now I'm working full time and where's that connection I've had to my culture? And so it was born from like personal need and care and that want and this intuition that like if I want it, maybe others do too. And that room for flexibility and honestly, East meets West is a big part of my heritage and identity that I've really brought to my work. I think a lot of South Asians are very scrappy and entrepreneurial. That's such a core motif in my own family that has shaped a lot of my work. And I think being a woman has shaped a lot of this for me for sure. And Caroline, you've obviously spent so much time thinking about this and you and I have chatted about it, but I was telling someone the other day, it took me 4 years, I think, or 3 years to call myself a CEO of a company or founder of a company. I would always call something Trailblazers and Trailblazers Media or umbrella or a platform. And I remember the first time I said it on stage, it was right before I was going to business school. And one of my friends caught it. She's like, I don't think I've ever heard you call yourself the founder and CEO and of a company. And I consider myself so privileged in how empowered I have been by my families, by my communities, by the institutions I've been a part of, by mentors. And still, even I grappled with some level of imposter syndrome. And I just think that's a reality that whether we're aware of it or not, many women today, and certainly women of color, face. And it's hard to get over. Like I said, I caught myself by surprise in that reality. And I just think some of that is like how we work to decondition ourselves, how we find support, not just from the women around us, but also the men too, and the allies that we have. Some of my best mentors have been people who've uplifted me and pushed me through that. But I do see the ways in which it has held me back, and a big goal of mine the last few years has really been pushing through that, pushing through the discomfort, calling myself the founder and CEO and company and other equivalents of that as I continue to grow, and hopefully setting that example for other women and women of color as well.
Mm. So, as you're pushing through this discomfort, what is one term of your old full time roles that you just will never accept again as you think about building and growing this amazing business that you started?
No, I love that. I love the leadership on your own terms. It's such a apt way for us to all be thinking about this. I'm a multi hyphenate, like a consummate multi hyphenate. When people ask me to try and distill my person and my work into like one thing, it's really difficult. And I think in a world where we're trying to constantly compress, right? Like what's the 4-word headline and like what is your content really about in one sentence? I'm trying to step back from that. I'm like, I am a multi-hyphenate. I do have a portfolio career. We're all versatile, multidimensional human beings. And like, just because we live in a world that's constantly asking for compression doesn't mean we need to actually compress ourselves. And I think in some of the roles that I've held, previously, I've been asked to do and engage in that compression and put some of those other parts of myself to the side. And I'm done doing that. What makes me incredibly good at what I do today, I think, hopefully my clients will attest to that, is that I do work across so many things. And so I think this whole idea that we should only be one thing is so long gone. And especially as AI begins to take over, being multidisciplinary, being cross functional is one of our greatest strengths and assets as human beings. Like we get to be that, we get to contain our multitudes. And so that's leadership on my terms and something I refuse to compromise on going forward.
I can't think of a better distillation of someone who is leading on their own terms. Simi, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for everything you're doing, Caroline, in your own right. And thank you for creating this space to talk about leadership on our own terms.
All right, absolutely. We'll talk soon.